He wasn't supposed to sit there. At least that's what the officer thought when he saw a janitor in faded work clothes quietly adjusting chairs inside a courtroom full of lawyers. On your feet, the cop barked, dragging him out in front of everyone. The man didn't resist, didn't argue. Phones came up, laughter followed, and in that moment, the janitor became the day's public humiliation. But what no one in that courthouse knew was that the man in handcuffs didn't just belong there. He owned the place. Before I show you how one officer's arrogance flipped the entire courtroom upside down, tell me where you're watching from in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the bell icon, because this story, it's about to get heavy. Now let's get into it. The courthouse was alive before the first case was even called. By 8:30, the marble lobby echoed with hurried footsteps and the shuffle of thick case files pressed against crisp suits. Lawyers exchanged clipped greetings. Clerks rushed with papers clutched to their chests, and the metal detectors buzzed rhythmically as the morning crowd streamed inside. The atmosphere carried that peculiar blend of tension and routine, a place where justice might be argued over, but bureaucracy always came first. Amid the swirl of polished shoes and pressed collars, one man moved quietly, almost invisible in plain sight. Dressed in a simple gray uniform with faded patches at the elbows, he pushed a janitor's cart stacked with rags, bottles of cleaning solution, and a mop balanced awkwardly against the side. Nobody stopped to greet him. Few even looked at him. To most, he was just another shadow against the courthouse walls, someone to step around, someone expected to fade into the background. He worked steadily, unbothered by the indifference. With deliberate care, he wiped down the brass handles of the courtroom doors, polished the benches, and adjusted the chairs into neat straight rows. When he spotted a scuff mark on the marble floor, he bent down with a cloth, scrubbing until the stone reflected the overhead lights again. A young lawyer, brushing past, muttered under his breath, "Better hurry up, old man, before the judge trips on that mop of yours." He didn't pause long enough to see the faint smile tugging at the janitor's lips. "Good morning to you, too," the janitor replied softly, though the lawyer was already gone. He moved on, steady and composed, sweeping the dust that gathered at the edges of the wooden benches. The quiet rhythm of his work seemed almost meditative. Every once in a while, his gaze drifted upward, taking in the tall, stained glass windows, the intricate moldings, and the solemn air of the courtroom. Unlike many who passed through, he seemed to notice these details, not with the hurried detachment of someone too busy to care, but with the calm appreciation of someone who had seen enough of life to know the value of stillness. A security guard stationed at the back gave him a curt nod, half acknowledgement, half dismissal. The janitor nodded back politely and continued his work. In those moments, nothing about him suggested that his life held any secrets worth knowing. He looked like a man resigned to a humble routine, satisfied with blending into the edges of other people's lives. Yet there was something in the quiet set of his shoulders, in the way he carried himself, even while bending over a mop, that hinted at more than what met the eye. The courthouse carried on around him, lawyers rehearsing opening statements, jurors being ushered into waiting rooms, clerks double-checking files. But for the janitor, it was just another morning, another day of unseen labor in a place where everyone else seemed larger. louder and more important. At least that's how it appeared. The courthouse doors swung open with a metallic groan as Officer Daniels strode in, boots clapping sharply against the marble floor. He was tall, broad, and carried himself with the kind of swagger that came from years of wearing authority like armor. His uniform was neatly pressed, badge polished until it caught the light, but it wasn't respect that followed him down the hall. It was the wary silence that people gave to a man who made a habit of flexing his power. "Move it along, folks," Daniels barked at a small knot of visitors who had paused near the security checkpoint. They scattered quickly, murmuring apologies though they had done nothing wrong. Daniels smirked. He liked that. Control. As he adjusted his belt and scanned the hallway, his gaze landed on the janitor. The man was quietly wiping fingerprints off the glass door leading into Courtroom 3. His cart parked neatly at the side. Daniel slowed, narrowing his eyes as if something about the sight bothered him. "What are you doing here?" Daniels demanded, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. The janitor looked up calmly, cloth still in hand. "Just cleaning, sir. Making sure the courtrooms are ready before proceedings begin." Daniels frowned. "Cleaning? During court hours? Looks more like loitering to me." The janitor tilted his head, patient. "I start early so I don't disturb anyone once sessions are in full swing. I'll be done in just a few minutes." But Daniels wasn't satisfied. His eyes lingered on the man's simple uniform, the scuffed shoes, the quiet composure. Something about it irritated him. "You don't belong standing around here," he snapped. "This area is for attorneys, court officials, officers of the law, not janitors hanging about like they're part of the show." The janitor set his rag back on the cart, meeting the officer's glare without flinching. "I understand, sir. I'll move along to the next room." That even tone only made Daniels bristle more. He stepped closer, looming over the older man. "Don't get smart with me. I've seen plenty of your type, always looking for an excuse to sneak into places you're not supposed to be. You think I don't notice?" A couple of clerks passing by slowed, sensing the tension. One gave a nervous glance but kept walking, unwilling to get involved. The janitor straightened, his hands resting lightly on the handle of the cart. "With respect, officer, I go where I'm assigned. Nothing more, nothing less." Daniels gave a short, derisive laugh. "Assigned? Please. People like you don't get assignments. They get told to stay out of the way. You're lucky I don't toss you outside right now." For a long moment, the hallway was silent, but for the buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead, the janitor held his ground, saying nothing more. He knew better than to argue. Daniels finally snorted, waving a dismissive hand. "Yeah, keep mopping, but watch yourself. I'll be keeping an eye on you." With that, the officer stalked off down the hall, boots echoing sharply again. The janitor exhaled quietly, adjusted the mop on his cart, and continued with his work. Yet the encounter lingered like a shadow. He knew this wouldn't be the last time the officer came looking for him. By mid-morning, the courthouse was packed. The murmur of voices carried through the halls as people filled the benches, waiting for their cases to be called. Inside Courtroom 3, the air was thick with the low rustle of papers and the squeak of polished shoes across the wooden floor. The janitor slipped in quietly, cart rolling softly behind him. He had a habit of working with precision, moving like a man who knew exactly where he fit in the machinery of the morning. He straightened the benches, adjusted a crooked chair, and bent down to pick up a crumpled program someone had dropped. He barely made it 3 steps before a sharp voice cut through the chatter. You again? The sound of Officer Daniels' boots echoed as he strode into the room. His hand rested on his holster, not in threat, but in habit, a gesture meant to draw eyes. A few heads turned, conversations dying into uneasy silence. The janitor paused, still holding the paper he'd picked up. Just tidying up, sir. Daniel snorted, loud enough for everyone to hear. Tidying up? In the middle of open court? You've got no business being in here. This isn't your playground. A couple of lawyers seated near the front exchanged smirks. One leaned toward the other, muttering just loud enough to carry, "Guess housekeeping got lost." Daniel's voice grew louder, feeding off the attention. "I told you I'd be watching you. And here you are, wandering where you don't belong." "I have work to do," the janitor replied, his tone steady but soft. "Work?" Daniels barked out a laugh. "Like, don't kid yourself. You're standing in the middle of officers of the court, trained attorneys, people who actually matter. You're just a mop with legs." The courtroom fell still. Nobody moved to intervene. Some watched with discomfort, others with barely concealed amusement. The judge, not yet on the bench, lingered in chambers. The scene was left unchecked. Daniel stepped closer, towering over the janitor. "I ought to remove you right now. Save everyone the embarrassment of having to look at you." The janitor tried to explain, his voice quiet. "I'm only here to..." But Daniels cut him off, barking for the room to hear. "Save it. You think you can stroll around, act like you belong among us? Not on my watch." He reached out suddenly, yanking the crumpled paper from the janitor's hand, tossing it aside as if it proved something. Gasps rippled across the benches when Daniels grabbed the janitor's arm, twisting it behind his back. "Sir, that's not necessary," the janitor said, pain flashing across his face, though he didn't resist. Daniels sneered. "Not necessary? I'll decide what's necessary. Nobody sneaks around my courtroom." The metallic snap of handcuffs clamped down, sharp and final. The janitor winced, but remained silent, his eyes cast downward. Around them, whispers buzzed. "Is that really a janitor?" one juror muttered. "What did he even do?" But no one rose to object. No one dared stand against the uniform. Daniels gave a triumphant tug on the chain, raising his voice once more for effect. "This is what happens when people forget their place." And with that, he dragged the janitor toward the aisle, every eye in the courtroom following as silence thickened into something heavy and uncomfortable. The courtroom doors banged open as Officer Daniels hauled the janitor out, the steel handcuffs clinking with every pull. The sudden disruption caught the attention of those waiting in the corridor. Defendants clutching files, families whispering anxiously, lawyers pacing while checking their watches. Heads turned, conversations stilled, and a ripple of murmurs followed in their wake. Daniels made sure of it. He yanked the janitor forward with exaggerated force, chest puffed out, voice pitched to carry. "See this?" Daniels barked, pointing a gloved finger at the man bound in cuffs. "This is what happens when people stick their noses where they don't belong." A few spectators chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or look away. One young man near the benches pulled out his phone, angling it discreetly to record. Soon others followed, camera lenses glinting under the fluorescent lights. The janitor walked steadily, refusing to stumble, though Daniel's grip was rough. His silence seemed to irritate the officer even more, an unspoken defiance in refusing to beg, in refusing to break. "Answer me when I'm talking to you!" Daniels barked, giving the chain a sharp tug. The janitor winced, but held his tongue. Daniels turned to the growing crowd, his voice laced with mockery. You think because you push a mop in the same halls as judges and lawyers that you're one of them? Newsflash, you're not. You're just a janitor. And janitors don't sit in court. They clean it. Laughter rippled through a corner of the crowd. A middle-aged man muttered, "Guess he thought he was somebody." The janitor's eyes flicked toward the voices but didn't linger. His face was unreadable, calm, almost too calm for someone being paraded like a criminal. Daniels shoved him toward the main lobby, raising his voice louder with every step. "I warned him this morning, told him to stay out of the way. But no, he thought he could strut around like he owned the place. Not on my watch." They passed a cluster of law students waiting for their hearings. Notebooks clutched against their chests. Some looked horrified. Others whispered eagerly as their pens scratched details onto paper. "Is he being arrested?" one asked under her breath. "For what?" another replied. Nobody had an answer. By the time Daniels reached the front lobby, the crowd had thickened. People stood on tiptoe, craning their necks to see. Phones were raised openly now, little red recording lights blinking. The spectacle had become entertainment. Daniels thrived on it. He raised his voice even higher, addressing the room like an actor on stage. "Take a good look, folks. This is what happens when a nobody pretends to be somebody. Remember this face, because this is the example." The janitor's composure didn't falter. His breathing was steady, his shoulders straight. He did not plead, he did not argue, and somehow that only made the humiliation more striking. Because while Daniel shouted, mocked, and performed for the crowd, this man endured it in silence, a quiet dignity that stood in stark contrast to the officer's arrogance. And the more the officer tried to belittle him, the more uneasy some in the crowd began to feel. Just as Daniel shoved the janitor toward the glass doors that opened onto the courthouse steps, a calm but firm voice cut through the noise. "That's enough." The crowd shifted, parting as a man in a tailored navy suit stepped forward. His stride was purposeful, his expression controlled but hard. He looked like he belonged in the building, one of those lawyers whose presence commanded respect without effort. Daniels barely glanced at him. "Keep moving," he barked at the janitor, tightening his grip. The suited man stepped closer, his tone sharper. "Officer, release him. Now." Daniels turned, eyes narrowing. "And who exactly do you think you are?" The man didn't flinch. "Someone who actually knows who you've got in cuffs." He let the words hang in the air, then, quieter but heavy with meaning, "Do you?" The lobby grew tense, the murmurs dying. Phones lowered slightly as people strained to hear. Daniel scoffed. "He's a janitor." Caught him snooping around the courtroom, pretending he belongs. The suited man's lips pressed into a thin line, almost a smile, but not quite. He reached into his leather briefcase, pulling out a slim folder. "A janitor, is he?" He flipped it open deliberately. "This janitor is the registered owner of this building. Every square foot of it. From the marble under your boots to the chambers you strut around like you run them. The state leases it from him." A ripple of gasps moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Daniels blinked, stunned for the first time that morning. He glanced from the folder to the man in cuffs, then back again, his confidence faltering. "You're lying. He's nothing but..." The janitor finally lifted his head, speaking for the first time since the humiliation began. His voice was low, steady, but it carried. He's not lying. Daniels froze. The suited man snapped the folder shut and took a step closer. You've just dragged the landlord of this courthouse through the halls like a common criminal. And you did it in front of half the city, judging by how many cameras are rolling right now. Dozens of phones raised higher in unison, their little screens reflecting Daniels's paling face. For the first time since he'd entered the building, the officer looked unsure. His grip on the handcuffs loosened ever so slightly. The crowd, once amused, now buzzed with incredulous whispers. The janitor owns the courthouse? Is that even possible? He didn't even say a word the whole time. Daniel swallowed hard, his bravado cracking under the weight of too many eyes. But his pride wasn't ready to let go. Even if he is, he should have identified himself. How was I supposed to know? The suited man's reply was sharp as a blade. Because you're supposed to treat everyone with dignity until proven otherwise. That badge doesn't give you the right to strip someone of it. The words landed heavy. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but the janitor, still calm, still silent, seemed to grow taller despite the cuffs on his wrists. The balance of power in the room had shifted. The crowd pressed in closer, the air thick with anticipation. Daniel's hand hovered uncertainly over the chain, as though unsure whether to hold tighter or let go. The suited man's words still echoed in the lobby, but everyone's eyes had shifted to the quiet figure in cuffs. For the first time that morning, the janitor straightened his back fully, meeting the gaze of the crowd. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, measured, but unmistakably firm. I didn't say anything because I didn't think I needed to. I've been working in these halls for years, and no one has ever asked my name. You all saw me as just a man with a mop. Nothing more. That's how you chose to see me. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Daniels shifted uncomfortably. You're telling me you're the owner of this building? The janitor's eyes flicked to him, steady and unblinking. I'm not telling you, officer. I'm confirming it. I bought this courthouse 8 years ago. The state leases it from my company. I fund the upkeep, the renovations, the salaries of half the maintenance staff you walk past without a word. And when the pipes burst last winter, I was the one who covered the repairs out of pocket so trials wouldn't be delayed. Murmurs rippled through the lobby. One woman whispered, "He's serious." Another, "That's why he knows every corner of this place." The janitor continued, his tone still even, his presence suddenly commanding. I dress like this because I believe in working alongside the people I employ. No job is beneath me, and I clean these halls myself from time to time because it reminds me of where I came from and of the people who are always overlooked. The words struck deeper than any outburst could have. Even those who had laughed earlier now looked down, ashamed. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed again. His voice, when it came, was far less certain. I didn't know. If I'd known." The janitor cut him off, his tone cool but not angry. "That's the problem. You shouldn't need to know someone's bank account to treat them with dignity. A badge is meant to protect, not humiliate. But you chose humiliation." Gasps spread through the crowd again, but now they were directed at the officer. The phones that had captured the earlier mockery now captured his stunned silence, his authority collapsing under the weight of exposure. From the side, a clerk who had smirked earlier shifted uncomfortably, whispering, He really is the owner." Even the judge had emerged from chambers by now, robes trailing as he took in the scene. His stern expression softened into awkward respect as he addressed the janitor. No, the billionaire. Sir, I regret what has taken place here today. The janitor gave a small nod, his gaze still calm. There's nothing to regret if lessons are learned. Daniel's grip finally slackened completely, the clink of the handcuffs echoing as he fumbled with the key. The moment the cuffs fell away, the janitor rubbed his wrists lightly, then looked the officer directly in the eye. I don't need your apology, he said softly, but I won't forget what you did here today. Daniels, pale and sweating, could only nod faintly as the crowd's eyes bored into him. The humiliation had turned, and now it belonged entirely to him. The cuffs clattered against the marble floor as Daniel scooped them up, his hands trembling despite his efforts to look composed. Around him, the crowd hadn't dispersed. They lingered, whispering, staring, their phones still raised. But the atmosphere had shifted. Where moments ago people had laughed or looked away, now they watched with a mixture of awe and shame. The janitor, no, the billionaire, stood calmly, brushing his palms against his uniform as though dusting off nothing more than chalk. His face gave nothing away. No triumph, no smugness, only the steady composure of a man who had endured far worse and survived. Daniels cleared his throat, his voice cracking slightly. Sir, I shouldn't have... The man raised a hand, stopping him cold. Don't apologize because you've been exposed. Apologize because you were wrong. Daniels swallowed hard, but the words wouldn't come. He muttered something under his breath and stepped back, suddenly very small, in a uniform that had seemed so imposing minutes before. The judge moved forward, his robe swishing softly as he spoke. I assure you, sir, this incident does not reflect the values of this court. The billionaire gave a faint smile, polite but distant. Values are measured in actions, Your Honor, not in words. The remark landed heavily, leaving the judge momentarily speechless. A young lawyer, who had smirked earlier when Daniels mocked the janitor, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, eyes fixed on the floor. A clerk, who had walked by earlier without so much as a greeting, now bit his lip, suddenly aware of how invisible they had made the man feel. The entire lobby seemed to ripple with unease, each person quietly replaying how they had contributed to the silence. Through it all, the billionaire remained composed. He didn't grandstand. He didn't scold. He simply gathered himself, rolled his shoulders back, and walked toward the courtroom doors with the same quiet dignity with which he had entered that morning. The crowd parted instinctively, no longer looking at him as a janitor to step around, but as someone far greater, and yet someone who hadn't needed wealth or title to command respect. He had commanded it simply by refusing to break. Daniel stood frozen near the entrance, his face pale, his authority stripped away. The murmurs now turned against him. Did you see how he treated him? He's finished if this goes public. Phones were recording everything. The officer's chest rose and fell quickly, the weight of humiliation pressing harder with every whispered word. But the billionaire didn't look back. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than any parting insult could have been, and as the heavy wooden doors closed behind him, The courthouse remained suspended in a hush that felt more like judgment than justice. If you had been in that courtroom, would you have stepped in to stop the humiliation or stayed silent like everyone else? And do you think that officer deserves to keep his badge after what he did? Drop your answers in the comments. I'm going to be reading through them. Make sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed the story, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a video. Share this one with your friends because the more people see it, the more we keep these conversations alive. And while you're here, you'll see other stories popping up on your screen. Watch them next, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with another brand new video.